I'm Darren Stetzel, Senior Vice President of Asia Agriculture at StoneX, and you are listening to our latest AgriAsia podcast from Singapore, where our local experts join together to discuss the latest market developments from a unique Asia perspective. Today I sit down with Dixon Poe, our Vice President of Agricultural Markets for the region, to discuss price volatility in cocoa, the weather-driven narrative from West Africa, and some key fundamentals to watch out for in the weeks ahead. Please do follow or subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening so you do not miss any new episodes. We have some truly insightful markets to discuss every week, and you wouldn't want to miss one. Let's get into it. Thank you very much, Dixon, for taking the time to join us this week. Let's start with the overall picture and what happened to cocoa prices in the last week.
Yeah, thanks, Darren, for having me on once again. So we saw cocoa futures saw 3 straight days of declines, with both the London and New York contracts slipping to 1-week lows. So earlier in the week, it started off with prices rallying back towards the recent highs, which was likely fueled by concerns such over like black pot disease, tight inventories, and lagging port arrivals. Despite that, farmers have mentioned that the presence of black pots was not sufficient to cause concern just yet. Also, there has been some recent weather relief in West Africa as well, which could have led to the cooling off in momentum by the week's end.
Yeah, so you mentioned West Africa there. So how about the weather? Is that still driving the broader narrative?
Yes, without a doubt. So the weather story has kind of been shifting all week. There have been heavy rains in Ivory Coast, which have been kind of delaying port deliveries and also raising disease risks. But now we are seeing rains return to Ghana, which is easing earlier dryness and also helping flowering for the 25-26 crop. However, it's still kind of early days, and the potential for crop stress or black pot outbreaks still remains there. Meanwhile, port arrivals in Ivory Coast are still lagging slightly behind year on year, adding to longer-term supply concern even as near-term flows improve.
Thanks, Dixon. So how are things looking on the demand side of things?
Well, demand isn't exactly falling off a cliff, but there are questions in the air. So there are roasters in both Europe and Asia that are showing some signs of demand rationing amid high prices. And all eyes are on the upcoming grind data. So July's grind data were kind of a mixed bag, and traders are waiting anxiously to see whether the latest price surge has started to bite. But for now, high-end chocolate brands are still absorbing costs, but any weakening in the grind could become a drag, especially if supply risks stabilize.
Interesting. So what would you say is the key takeaway or the key area that traders in the Asia region should focus on this week?
So right now, the market remains fundamentally pretty tight, but there is some short-term pressure building. Traders in Asia, especially those grindhouses and exporters, need to keep close tabs on weather patterns in West Africa and also ice stock trends. If rains were to continue and the port deliveries pick up once again, prices could ease further. But if black pot flares up or certified stocks drop, the market could swing quickly back to a bullish momentum. For right now, it's kind of a pause rather than a pivot, with the upside risk still very much in play.
We seem to keep coming back to the weather in West Africa and the impact that's having on the market, trading decisions, and the market as a whole. What are the implications of the erratic weather there for the 25-26 crop?
Yeah, so there has been some recent rainfall, which has helped flowering, but the situation remains pretty uncertain. If black pot spreads or rain becomes excessive, the main crop output could be at risk. The region's infrastructure also struggles during extended wet periods, which could slow down port flows and tighten nearby availability, just as seasonal demand picks up. It really is a weather wildcard, and traders are staying close to updated forecasts.
So before this, I think we saw the longer-term outlook as bullish. Is that still the case even with the pullback we've seen this week?
I would say yes, structurally, the market remains in kind of a bullish momentum. So between disease risk, aging trees, climate volatility, and low stock levels, supply in cocoa is kind of facing real medium to long-term constraints. So even though we might see some consolidation in the near term, the bigger picture still points to elevated prices and supply risk heading into 2026 and beyond. Some analysts have even warned that the world could lose up to a third of cocoa production in the next 15 years if these issues aren't addressed properly.
Thanks, Dixon. So aside from supply and demand fundamentals, cocoa especially, of all the markets we cover, has a lot of exposure to funds and both buying and selling, kind of causing a lot of volatility in the market. So what has the recent Commitment of Traders report been telling us on their involvement of the market today?
Yeah, so just the New York COT report for last week actually showed funds leaving the market while commercials added shorts into their positions. The open interest on the last day of the week actually increased with the market falling at the same time, signaling that new shorts are actually entering the market. Also, just something to note that these shorts were done near the recent lows observed.
Thanks, Dixon. So I feel like we've covered the supply-demand fundamentals and we've touched upon the fund position. One thing we like to ask all our experts on the podcast is that following our conversation on what has been happening in the market, what are the key market topics we should be keeping a close eye on in the weeks coming up?
Yeah, so I think some of the important things that we should look out for will include like how the weather develops in the Ivory Coast. Some farmers mentioned that in order to stop the growth of mold, there's a need for more sunshine. And another thing that is always key is how open interest fluctuates as the market moves. Because this will tell us whether there are new shorts entering the market or if other things such as long liquidation or short covering are taking place. Also, something to keep an eye out for will be the announcement of a new farm gate price in Ivory Coast, because producers could potentially be sitting on their beans until this is released.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Dixon, for joining us this week and sharing your expertise. Wishing you a really fantastic week ahead.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a recommendation to trade, an investment research, or an offer to buy or sell any financial product. It does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs. The trading of financial products such as futures, options, or swaps involves a substantial amount of risk and may not be suitable for everyone. Past results are not indicative of future performance. You are advised to perform an independent investigation of any transaction to determine whether any transaction is suitable for you.